I'd like to welcome everybody today. Good morning, and on a fine, chilly Tuesday morning. It was supposed to be sunny and beautiful out today, even if it was cold. They were wrong. Cerini and Associates is proud to present today's webinar, Cybersecurity in a Virtual World. Sounds like a song. This is a very hot topic given the shift of people working from home and the ever-increasing cybersecurity threats. I am Shari Diamond. I'm a partner at Cerini and Associates, and I will be today's moderator. I'm really super excited about today's discussion. Started my career as a COBOL programmer back in the mid-1980s. Probably shouldn't admit that. And then shifted to IT auditing back then at one of the big 8 accounting firms. And you're going to say, Shari, there are only 4 now. That is correct. That's how long I've been doing this. I have seen the technology environment shift from large data centers, huge mainframes, and clunky, chunky desktops to network operations centers that fit into your little closet, servers that are like the size of large cable boxes, and devices that were once limited to science fiction. Data is far more accessible than ever before, but unfortunately, the security issues have not changed much. We still see weak passwords like password as a password. Poor access security controls and very bad network implementations. And we also still have people that want your data and want to do you harm by bringing your network down. So lots to be concerned about. Today's format's a little different. We have an industry expert panel discussion looking at this from 3 angles: technology, auditing, and insurance. Oh my. 3 words that scare most people. So start by giving yourself a pat on the back that you were brave enough to be here this morning. Those 3 concepts make for a really robust operations. With me today is Kevin Urso. He is president of Connected Technology. We also have Joe Horowitz. He is director of audit at Stetson Cybergroup. And last but not least is Michael Fleischer. He is a senior vice president at SterlingRisk Insurance. We're going to be talking about cyber risk insurance. Before we get started with our discussions, we have a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website within 2 weeks. On the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat option. Please use that to post any questions or comments you may have, and I will relay that to the panelists. Our contact information will be made available either through the chat or after the session is over. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you may have. So let's get started. First, we're going to hear a brief intro from each of our panelists describing what they do and how things may have changed within the last 8 months. To start us off, let's hear from Kevin, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I recognize some of the names I see on the chat, and the new people, it's nice to meet you. So like Shari said, my name is Kevin Urso. I'm a partner at Connected Technology. Connected Technology, we were founded in 1998, so we have about 20 years of experience in IT. We're located in St. James. And we work with many types of businesses, private and public schools, as well as nonprofits. We're also a woman-owned, certified woman-owned and minority business. Connected Technology is what you called a managed service provider. So what that means is organizations outsource the management and maintenance of their computer systems and security, or portions of their systems to us. We help organizations build a plan for their security and then monitor and maintain that system on an ongoing basis. What we do specifically varies from organization to organization because every organization is different in what the requirements are, how they work. For example, larger groups, they may hire us to just do their patching or just monitor for security threats and provide them reporting, while smaller organizations may hire us to run and manage all aspects of their computer systems. But across the board, we basically follow industry best practices for security that help set up a good baseline of cyber protection for their clients. What makes us different from other managed service companies is that everything we do starts with security. All our technicians are trained in at least one cybersecurity specialty, and many of them have 2 or 3 or 4 certifications under their belt.
Just curious, Kevin, how have things changed, like, in your servicing of, to your clients? with the pandemic? What were some of the things that you did like right on the onset and back in like March?
So obviously back in February, March, the rapid change to remote work was a huge change. So what we saw was organizations that had a plan, had a DR plan, had been doing a lot of those best practices that I mentioned. They had a pretty smooth transition over. Companies that we were kind of pushing and weren't always doing, they had a much rougher transition to the remote. They were kind of running behind. We saw a lot of organizations trying to figure out on the fly, how do they access their data? How do they access it efficiently and securely? We also saw a lot of organizations make cybersecurity a priority, because they started to realize that it's what is keeping their business running, especially at these times. Having that connectivity and the ability to share became paramount for them.
Right. Yeah.
We implemented a lot of cloud services. People started to use some more different services. A lot of VPN, a lot of remote access work, and also a lot of the basic security tools like multi-factor authentication, password vaults, user awareness training. So we've been doing a lot of that over the last 8 months or so.
That's great. Yes. So Joe, tell us about what you do. I know we have a lot of similarities in the audit world, and maybe how things have changed in the last since the pandemic in the last 8 months with the virtual work environment.
Sure. First, let me tell a little bit about myself and Stetson. So I've been in audit for over 20 years. I started off in governmental auditing and healthcare, predominantly doing financial operational audits. Started when SOX was just coming up the turnpike. Kind of transitioned to IT audits and then ultimately into cybersecurity audits. So I've done the whole gamut. Also worked a little bit for external audit. I am a certified information systems auditor, certified data protection security engineer through ISACA, a certified internal auditor, and certified in risk management assurance through the IIA. I also handle the website for the IIA on the Long Island chapter. So a little bit about Stetson. We handle cybersecurity consulting from all different aspects. I do, and I work with the team to do the audit side of things. We do NIST risk assessments, gap analysis. We're also next year going to start working with organizations to get them CMMC compliant, which is of course a combination, for those that don't know, it's a combination of NIST standards and DFAR from the federal government for contractors. We also have, we'll also be helping some agencies get SOC 2 compliant. So we have everything from that audit side. We also have where we do pen testing, vulnerability scannings and testing for organizations. And we are pretty good with, we do incident response, and we also do digital forensics. So we really run the gamut. We can help your organization from start to finish. Over the last 8 months, so I've only got to Stetson back in July, so I can tell you a little bit about my experience prior to that. 8 months ago, I was working for a government agency, and it was a New York City firm. And of course, we know some of these government agencies are not prepared for working remote. As soon as the pandemic started rising, I told my boss, I said, we need to get our staff home right away. And I told the executive director, it's really a good idea to start getting laptops for everybody. If you don't have already, get them laptops, get them home. I know I spent the first 2 to 3 weeks working with our staff on the phone to really do, I was doing their tech support to get them up and running, making sure that they had their router up and going, that they had everything, their firewalls, everything at home. I think from a Stetson perspective, I think we found a lot of businesses also had the same problem, where they really had a lot of people in their organizations because they're smaller and mid-sized, where they're just desktops. They didn't have the laptop, so they really weren't prepared for the VPN, and they really weren't at home. Some people didn't have like the high-speed internet. You would see a lot of freezing and things of that nature. So I think with this pandemic, it's really people have really had to start understanding that they need to get these type of capabilities in their home, because this the second wave is coming. We've actually just started to do a blended shift, because our CEO is very concerned about his staff. So that's great. I got to give him a little shout out for that. And we are very prepared, and we're making sure that all of our businesses that we work with are prepared in the same way that they have the technology and they have the controls in place to be ready for the second wave.
Great, great. Michael, I'd like to have you talk about like the insurance aspect, especially cybersecurity insurance. It's a relatively new-ish insurance. When it first came on, I don't think it covered much. But now I would really like to see, what you do, what you're seeing, how you're interfacing with companies, and what you think the next direction will be like, and where you saw the last 8 months and where you see them coming.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Let me give you a quick about SterlingRisk. SterlingRisk is a full-service risk management and insurance brokerage operation. We are one of the largest on Long Island and one of the largest privately held firms in the United States. We've been in business since, I believe, 1932. And I played with a calculator, and I've been in this industry for approximately 40 years, running the gamut from working in claims handling operations, in risk management, working for multinational brokerage firms, and now I'm a senior vice president at Sterling. The beauty is that we're large enough to handle multinational accounts, but yet have the ability to focus on, much, broader spectrum of types of risks. Things that differentiate us: we have a tremendous amount of services in-house that most brokers do not, including risk management services, legal services, environmental, aviation, if anybody has an exposure. We do a lot more analysis than our competitors. And that's really enabled us to focus much deeper on our clients' needs and assist them with regard to managing their risk. Insurance is only a portion of it. It is really the last key to the puzzle. And when my colleagues talk about their tech and auditing procedures and things that they're going to be looking for clients to implement, we utilize that and weave that as part of our process. The pandemic has certainly affected our clientele, as well as insurance companies, as well as brokers. We were out in front of this long ago. We've always had the capability to work remotely. Never did we have a situation where we have 99% of our staff working remotely. But we always had the ability to access our computer system pretty much from anywhere in the world. So, it enabled us as of March 15th to really pretty much, hit the ground running, and we really did not miss a beat. I think I was in my office the other day printing some material for this. I counted from the tags when you walk in with your temperatures and whatever. I think I've been in my office 6 times since March. Okay, so it gives you an idea of how remote we've been. How it's affected the overall cyber business. It's a part of what's affected a tremendous amount. And when I get my little piece, I'll kind of go into it, but it's really affected the cyber world in terms of insurance dramatically, because of the ability for people to remote. And as some of my colleagues mentioned, you've got a lot of people out there that aren't on secure networks and are on devices that aren't really optimum. What that does is it really opens up the opportunity for ransomware, et cetera. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that later. Okay.
Great. Yeah, and us too. I mean, we've also been working remotely forever anyway, when we have to go to clients, but the load and the shifting of having to be pretty much all remote, even though the office was open, we had to take a lot of precautions too about we can't have everybody come in. but we really needed to make it work more effectively for us. And you don't realize what you don't have until you have to go and do something. It's quite a challenge. And, it's given me a different appreciation when I go and do the internal audits and I have to speak with the IT directors. I now have a newfound appreciation for what they have to go through. So not that I didn't understand it, but I appreciate it a little bit more. So that's a shout out to my clients out there. Some of the top security issues that you're seeing, I mean, we're just about wrapping up the craziest year ever in 2020. We're a few weeks away from ending that and trying to go into 2021. And what do we see as the top, security issues there? I guess, Joe, maybe you could start us off even from like, an audit perspective, a risk perspective. What are you seeing is happening? I know VPN's been getting in the news lately. They're coming up with a model that's called Zero Trust Security Model, which we all know has been around for quite some time, and they're promoting it as something new. So,
right. So a couple of things. So I would say my top 3 security risks coming for 2021, which is actually just exploding now. Number 1 is ransomware. Right. You see in the news, I mean, the cost of ransomware is just asking for more and more and more. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. The one big thing about ransomware, and that I think we're going to cover later on, but I think we need to throw it out there, is that people just don't know what to do when they get ransomware anymore. A lot of times people or companies will just pay the ransomware. However, I mean, the federal government now is really clamping down on that. There are restrictions and actually monetary fines for anybody who pays these ransomware to anyone on their list, say like North Korea or any of those, or Iran or something like that. So you really have to work with the government when you get hit with ransomware. You just can't go to your cybersecurity firm or whoever you're going to and say, I'm going to go pay the ransomware and I'll get paid the insurance back from it, or whatever the case might be. So ransomware is definitely one thing. Phishing is always going to be there. Phishing is huge. It's probably right up there. People like to just click on things, especially now between COVID and the holidays. The amount of emails, I know just my school district alone, I get a ton of emails from the schools, talking about this person, this is the rates today, this is the rates today. It's very easy to look at one of those emails and just think it's another one from the school and click on the link to the PDF document that's coming through and get hit with something, whether it be malware or ransomware, whatever the case might be. Same thing with the same as with the phishing, but it's also vishing, smishing, and where you get this SMS messages, the voicemail messages. So it's really a big problem there. And then I think that probably the third biggest thing is the unknown devices on your network now, especially with people working from home. There are people who are going to be bringing their own devices, and some companies aren't aware of who's connecting into your network if you don't have the right to do that. As far as zero trust goes, zero trust is a great concept. Yes, you don't trust and then verify, but I think that probably, from my perspective, works better for the bigger organizations who have the time and resources and can implement it, without restricting the work that their employees do. I'm all for it as a controls guy and audit guy. That, Shari, that I don't like anything getting through, and I don't want anything just coming. But you have to. One thing I think you and I have spoken about in the past is you have to audit to scale, and you have to put controls to scale. You can't do 100% zero trust. There's just no way. It's a combination of the zero trust, other manual controls, IT controls, training, policies and procedures. There's no one shop fix it all for any organization.
Right. Kevin, from a technical perspective, what are you seeing as some of the, the top security issues in 2021? What maybe where are you advising your clients, that you have, the direction of, is it hardware, software combination?
What we're really seeing a huge spike in most recently is the email hijacking. So usually starts with some type of phishing, or maybe they're using a weak password, or their password got compromised, but the hacker will somehow get your password to your Office 365 account, usually through a phishing. They'll set up rules in the background, and they'll quietly take over that conversation. And before you know it, they're speaking to your client about payment issues, and you don't even know what's going on. And all of a sudden you get a call saying, hey, I made a ACH payment, and it wasn't to you, it was to wherever. So we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing, obviously, all the home computers that came onto the networks. So that opens up a huge security hole there. You have to go back and kind of vet those machines, figure out what's being attached to the network. And also, doing an inventory of where your data is on the network and what you have. A lot of people don't even know where everything is, so before you can secure it, you got to understand what you have, where your data is, and what's important to you. So
Right.
that's what we're seeing a lot of.
And just Michael too, from like an insurance, cybersecurity insurance perspective too. I mean, like if people are falling prey to these schemes that are out there, how does the insurance fit in? Does it not? And what are you seeing, for, maybe for 2021, where you think people, how will that model change for the insurance?
Well, to give you an understanding, the top 5 causes, 38% are phishing, 32% are network intrusion, inadvertent disclosures, 12%, and then you've got stolen or lost devices or misconfiguration, a small percentage. To give you an idea of where this is going, in 2018, the largest ransom paid was approximately $250,000, okay? The largest ransom paid in 2019, $5.6 million, okay, by insurance companies, all right? The largest ransom demand in 2019 was $18.8 million. So you can see where this is going. There's a tremendous change. This is coinciding with a significant market shift in the insurance industry. Recognize that cyber insurance is really a relatively new form of policy. The first policies for cyber insurance were written in the late 90s, okay? So you're talking about something that's only really, been around for 30 years, okay? And what was exposed in the late 1990s compared to what is exposed today is a dramatic shift, okay? Certainly the past X number of 6, 7, 9 months with everybody working remotely has been a tremendous change. What's really the focus is that, again, as my esteemed colleagues outlined, there's a lot of security and or hardware issues that have to be addressed. But in addition, we've also got human issues, okay? We've all seen the commercials where the guy's doing a presentation and his children are walking around back behind him. And there's one where the kids are running around with a fire extinguisher at the end. And you say, wow, you think people are distracted? And the cyber criminals are utilizing that distraction as an opportunity, because they know that if people aren't really focused 100%, there's a good chance that I'm going to be able to be successful by, and it's the law of large numbers. If I throw out 100 opportunities and I've got somebody that's trying to teach their kid and manage their process, and, somebody's going to just say, sure, and flip it, what we find in our industry is that there's so many instances where we just know that people are not focused on what's going on, and they're just flipping emails, they're just sending it from here to there. And there's the opportunity, where somebody's not really 100% focused on what they're doing, so it's a big piece, there's no doubt.
And that's actually a really good point about focus, because one of the times a year when we do certain audit testing of certain processes, business processes, one of the times, we'll pick is when there's significant changes or when people are like checked out. This month is when a lot of people are checked out, they're preoccupied. And for sure, this is when we look to make sure that things are working as smooth, like we looked at the December month. So a really good point. Just want to remind everybody out there, someone actually did post a question. Thank you so much, Rocky. We're going to get to your question in a second, but please, you could post it in the chat. There's also a Q&A. I'm watching and monitoring both. And the next question from a panelist actually is in line with a question that I asked. I mean, there's governance involved, and how do you convince management to advocate for more security, especially when there's maybe uncertain revenues, coming down the pike. We just don't know what situation we're in. And the question that was actually posed was, with folks working remotely, what measures have your organizations put in place to communicate to your employees the importance of safeguarding work information, even at home? And that's a hard concept, I think, to get people to wrap their head around, that, even if I'm working on data, critical, sensitive information, Kevin, that goes back to your point, people don't even know what data they have. That's step one, know what your data is and know what you need to protect. But, yes, if I'm working someplace and people, are coming in and out, is that information even on my screen sensitive? Should I be locking that up? I mean, you have to kind of get into that mindset. From a governance perspective, Kevin, maybe you could, tell us, how do you kind of convince your clients that, there's money that needs to be spent here to get the infrastructure up to speed, and then we can talk about the audit and the insurance as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to answer Rocky's question, I think that's an important piece that needs to be in your cybersecurity training. So the training typically says, don't click on emails, don't open attachments, but I think it also has to talk about how do you deal with data, how do you share it? So that's a very important piece. On the tech side, I mean, there are some systems that can be implemented to help, like a data loss prevention system that maybe will notify management or notify someone that if a certain type of file was being sent out, give you a warning sign. So there is some tech that you can put on top of it to help you. In terms of the governance, it's a conversation you have to have. You look at, we try to share with our clients, if you don't do these things ahead of time, this could be the potential cost of it. And you're going to pay a lot more on the back end than if you plan ahead. And really, that's a lot of this is, it's all planning ahead. You can't, after it happens, it's very hard to recover from it.
That's true. And Joan, just curious, I mean, from the governance that we talk about on the auditing side, a big part of that is data classification. How do you get people to understand what kind of data they have and what they need to protect?
There are a couple of angles that we need to look at here. Number one, the message has to come from I know it's going to sound cliche, from the top. If you just have your IT folks going out to your employees and saying this is important, a lot of times they're not going to really disregard it because they follow the lead of their leader, right? If your CEO or your CFO are not buying into your program, they're not going to care. You need to have that message brought down. You need to have the right policies in place. You really need to then work with the whole organization to identify what data you have, where you have it, how it's classified, and determine how you're going to protect it. It's really a combination of all those factors. You can't. People at home can't be saving stuff to their desktop, or they can't be saving it into their local drives. You have to keep it on your secure network. So it's a combination of a lot of things to get that stuff protected.
Right. And as far as data goes, Michael, I'm just curious too. I mean, when you're writing the cybersecurity insurance policies, how is it like, how do you know what the world is that you're protecting? I mean, how are the clients able to communicate to you what their data is and then what needs to be protected? Do they understand it themselves?
A big part of the process that we do is that there has to be a really deep analysis. As part of the submission process, you're going to go through a detailed application that's going to outline all of their tech and all of their auditing procedures and outline what they're doing, so that the insurance company, can make a determination as to, how good a risk or how bad a risk any particular account is. What's really occurred over the past number of years is, as I said, this is a relatively new type of insurance, and many carriers jumped in it and they just tried to write as much as they could, and it got simpler and simpler, and it got to the point where the applications were pretty much a named insured and what class of business that you were in. And now that the market has changed dramatically. I mean, what we're looking at is significant increases in prices, on an average between 15 and 30% increase. And that's looking at clean accounts. And you're looking at the limitation of coverages, the restrictions in terms of the policy forms and higher deductibles and lower limits, et cetera. So, what we really look to do is do a real analysis, and that's part of our whole risk management process. We're going to analyze the exposures, try and work with the client and their professionals to try and beef up their security as best as possible, so that we can portray the best opportunity for obtaining coverage for the client. Okay, it's most important to in essence put your best foot forward. And
right.
if you think of insurance as just a solution, it's not. It's not going to be there, to just write a blank check. The insurance program, insurance carriers want to be sure that they're dealing with clients that that are focused on their risk management process. Okay, and
Right.
and the insurance is really just a piece of it, not the whole
Right,
thing.
that's a really good point. And we do have a question in the Q&A. We have two questions, actually. One is asking, isn't my desktop secure inside the network? And before I get to the second question, well, yeah, I mean, it's as good as your IT infrastructure is set up. It's hard to know whether your desktop is secure inside the network or not, because I don't know where the data is going, and I think that's an interesting thing. If you look at your data as a child, who does it play with? If it has a sleepover, how does it come back to you? What condition? So I think it's really important to, know who's managing your data and who's securing it. And again, that has to get ultimately, defined and portrayed to management. And then that helps us to the understanding of where we can reduce our risk, like through insurance. Another question that was posed was, I am a district treasurer for a school district. If we hire a full-time IT security expert, what should we be looking for in terms of their experience and technical knowledge? And this again goes in with having the right mix of people, professionals, and systems in place. Kevin, maybe you want to try to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's why, honestly, companies go and look for companies like us, because that's what we do day in and day out. To find one person that knows it all is a tough a tough thing to do. But yeah, you're looking for someone that has some. I think they got to have a strong IT background. Not just on security, but they got to know how it all works. They got to know the business. So in a school, they got to know how the school operates. What do they do? What are their busy times? All that. And then on top of that, they have to know the security piece, because security just isn't, patching. It's knowing all that and kind of putting it together.
Right. And then Joe, what are you seeing from an audit perspective when we go in and do those types of reviews?
Right. And, we work with school districts as well. And what I'd be looking for is, and just going off of experience, I want someone who has that information security background, who understands IT general controls as a start, and then understands also the cybersecurity controls. It's great to have the IT background and to understand the technology. And there's a lot of people out there that have that, but then they don't have the other piece. You can implement as many systems as you want, but you're right, Kevin's right. If you're not patching, if you're not updating your firewalls, if you're not putting the right configurations in place, if you're not putting the right password parameters in your system, then it just really doesn't mean anything. So these are the controls that the IT person or the information security person, however they want to the name of the person, is going to have to understand. And yes, they're also going to have to understand how everything fits into the business. They have to understand that everything that they're going to implement and all the controls are going to affect the business in one way, shape, or form. So it's a blended role that has to really understand a lot. And I know that's hard to find. There's not a lot of people who have that blended ability to know all this, but there are people in many organizations. I know information system auditors. I mean, they know both the technology side, they know the control side. I mean, that's a great resource to even go to look for someone to do these things if you're not going with an outside provider.
And students coming out of school too, the colleges are starting to really ramp up their cybersecurity areas. So you're going to start to see more and more, I think.
Yeah, I actually just I hired a young lady who actually is going for a cybersecurity degree out in Baruch College, and she's just a sponge, and she's learned a lot in school. So it's a great. She's teaching me a few things from the textbooks too that I may have forgotten after a while.
Right, and I mean that helps me too, because that's why we partner with so many different types of industries, as vendors, as relationships. So because I can only do what I can do in my world, but I have to learn more, and I have to constantly get that information. So from working with different people like yourselves and the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, I get a lot of information from that as well. You just have to stay on top of it. I also have feeds, news feeds, email feeds that come in. It's quite a lot of information, and it runs the gamut from different types of clients that I deal with. Obviously, school districts is my primary source of where I spend most of my time. So EduWeek, and then there's EdTech, but then there's also Data Breach Today. I'm concerned about some of the nonprofit world that goes on, and the medical stuff, So I think you just have to immerse yourself in a lot of stuff and find sites that give you a lot of those quick hits.
Can I add just one more thing, Shari?
Yeah, sure.
You also have to be a person who's not afraid to ask the resources for help.
Right.
Don't be afraid if there's something you don't know. There's a lot of resources and a lot of, half of these people have tons of contacts on LinkedIn. We're just very welcome to help you out with any questions that you have, and that you work with, and your auditors and vice versa.
Right.
And providers.
It's an excellent point. This is a really moving area. The whole industry has changed, and it's evolving and changing more. We are responding to people who are bad players in the system, and then when we beef up something, they respond by countering and trying to come up with something that can help break it. So it keeps everybody on their toes, and ransomware is probably the thing that kind of scares the jeebers out of most people. I just wanted to kind of touch into that, like how you can reduce your risk of ransomware. What are the options that are available? Obviously, backup. We talked about companies, they shouldn't really pay. What are the options? And now I just saw on Sunday on zdnet.com about hackers calling victims if they have not paid. So like they say, haha, you think you're so smart by getting your backup and you don't need to pay us. Calling people. This is just like, remember, the hacking industry is an industry. It's like a full paid, with benefits position in these companies. So, I'm just curious from your perspective, what is the strategies to reduce, the ransomware backing up, and what are we backing up, and how are we backing up, and where are we backing up? Anyone want to jump in and take it?
Mind if I jump in first? So I think number one, don't panic. It's going to happen. Nothing is foolproof. If you're going to get hacked, you're going to get hacked. There's no sense getting panicked over it. Reach out to whoever you need to reach out to, the insurance, reach out to your MSP provider, reach out to your cybersecurity consultants. Yes, you need good backup, and you need a good provider who's going to give you that backup, or have make sure the backup is happening maybe every hour, so you're not losing that information. Unfortunately, a lot of these hackers are also going after backups now. So you have to do your best to try to have some kind of backup plan to your backup. But as long as you don't panic and you do the right thing, you go through the right protocols, I think a lot of places will be okay. And just putting all the controls in place in the front end, you prevent as best you can, and then you plan for that event, and just don't panic.
Right, and it's easier said than done when you're in the throes of it. A question that just got posted, which is kind of in line with this whole thing. He's talking to his clients and about strengthening their cybersecurity posture, and the clients have flat out told me that they don't care about security. Ouch. In this day and age, how else can you hammer it home? You see the number of texts. Michael, you've just given statistics. We can keep giving out statistics on this stuff. It's not only just, holding somebody, hostage with ransomware, and you're going to be like, well, I have backups and I can restore from my backups, so I don't care about that. But no, there's other infiltrations that are happening. If they have your data, I think you have to put it in terms of dollars. It's like, what are some good ways to overcome this pushback? And that's the governance part of it. But there's a real cost to.
It's not just dollars, it's reputation. I mean, listen,
Absolutely.
reputation,
Absolutely.
they don't care until they're in the newspapers and nobody
Right.
wants to use them anymore because they didn't have any kind of security posture whatsoever.
Right. Right. It's a hard thing, but I mean, getting your data, it's very invasive. You know, and I know, Kevin, we've talked, you know, as you manage our, you know, IT infrastructure as well. I mean, you know, we're completely concerned about making sure that we are always up and running all the time. You know, so strategies, I guess, for reducing, you know, the attacks, the ransomware, if we do get, you know, what are our options at that point?
Right.
You know, how do backups work and things like that.
I think deeply looking into how your backups work is important. So whenever I speak to a new client, we ask, you have backups? Yeah, of course we have.
Right.
And when you start to dig into what they actually have, you know, are the backups really going off site? Do they have versions of them? So you have to ask your IT provider, tell me exactly what's happening. And I think you have to test it. You know, you've got to be able to, you know, with our clients, every single night we spin up those servers and we make sure they work. You know, if they don't, we're on it to figure out what happened. So
Right.
at any point in time, we feel confident that we could bring a server back. You know, I think that's very important, the testing. The other piece is the prevention, because now what you're seeing is, even though you have a backup, a hacker may say, hey, this data is pretty valuable. I'm just going to threaten to leak it. So now
Right.
if you're, you know, a company that has, you know, information you don't want your competitors to see, they're still going to get the ransomware because they're just going to say, oh, I'm going to publish it online for you.
Right.
So the end user training, you know, some of those preventative steps like the multi-factor authentication, all the basics
Mhm.
you have to do.
Right. And I guess, where does the cloud fit into all this? You know, like spinning up to a cloud.
It depends on the organization. You know, it depends on how they work. You know, so there are great tools out there. You know, using some of the Microsoft tools. You know, sharing your data that way, but it depends on how you operate. So you really have to kind of analyze how the organization runs and
Right.
see what fits.
So I guess to the question that Nick asked about, you know, what are some good ways to overcome this pushback? I guess you know, the thing is, like, what if that data gets out there to anybody and everybody? You know, what happens to your organization? You know, what are the effects to that?
I think it's a long-term conversation you have to have with those people. And I've had clients where we've talked, and you know, it's almost like you're talking, they're not listening. But you know, in March when we went remote, we had one client where we were kind of pushing them. You know, you got to do this, you got to do this. And when everything happened, they came back to us and said, you know what? Now I realize what you were doing, and you know, thank God we did it, because we were able to go remote. You know, and we continue business. It's not a quick conversation.
Right. And this is why risk assessments are performed. I mean, you got to do your due diligence, or someone in the organization has to do that due diligence, identify the risks, and just really lay out the impact. Show the executive suites that, hey, this is what's going to happen should something go on behind the scenes if someone grabs our data. It's very important to have those risk assessments performed. Right.
And Michael, is that something that's part of your insurance model, like to see that they do all these pieces?
You know, Shari, the problem is we find it with a number of different types of exposures that we have. There's always clients that want to quote unquote self-insure, okay? And there's a difference between self-insurance and the difference between avoidance. And what you're talking about here is somebody that's just avoiding it, where they're poo-pooing it and they don't really, you know, they don't really see the exposure. What needs to be done is you need to determine analysis, as you know, my colleagues advise. You've got to come up with a reasonable, realistic expectation as to what the cost, okay, in terms of dollars, in terms of time, okay. You know, a big part of insurance is not just the payment of the ransom or something like that, but you're talking about business interruption, restoration. What are the costs, and how long is it going to take? You know, every insurance policy has a waiting period of which, you know, you're going to have to assume that, you know, that loss, you know, during that time. And for the most part, most of these clients probably don't even have an idea of what that is. And they don't really have a feel for how long would they be out? You know, how detrimental would this be? and, you know, how would it affect their business going forward? And I think if you really did a true analysis, that, you know, that executive level individual or team of individuals are going to step back and they're going to say, wait a second, this is really a lot more than we anticipated. And you know what? Maybe we should be, you know, focusing on this a little bit more and take it more seriously, you know?
Right, right. And that brings me to another thing too, is like, well, and the user is probably the biggest culprit of all these events from happening. And so what advice do you have for, you know, working with people, your users, you know, identifying all your different types of users, first of all, and getting them cybersecurity awareness and training. I know Rocky put another question about test phishing emails within your organizations. I know there's products that do that. Some of these products are getting a little bit pricey. You know, how is that really working into the fabric? And is it good enough to just be a passive where somebody has to go on and just gets little micro trainings, or what else can you be doing to, you know, really hammer it into the users' heads? Kevin, I know we do something internally here with Protect PII, but there's no before. I mean, we've heard of a lot of things. We strongly encourage user awareness. This is probably the #1 line of defense. I hate to say it, but you know, it's only as good as we educate our users out there. What are you seeing, you know, Kevin, as far as, you know, the other companies and clients that you're working with?
So there's a lot of tools out there. I think what you want to look for, one, you know, going back a few years, we would sign people up and they would do a training once a year. You know, so everyone would sit down, they'd watch the video for a couple hours, and we found that really it worked for a month or two, you know, and then they forgot about it. So I think you want to look for a system that has a repetitive type schedule for your training. It also has some phishing, phish testing built in there, maybe dark web scans built in there, but it also has a portal that management or even the employee themselves can go in and see how they're doing. You know, I think that's very important, because otherwise it's just, you kind of just do the video to get it over with, you know? So I think that helps a lot.
Right. And Joe, have you seen organizations doing, like, you know, increasing their phishing attempts?
I echo what Kevin says. You know, once a year is not enough when you do your trainings. We push for at least twice a year. Wherever I've been, I've pushed for at least twice a year, because you're right, you do it once and you forget about it. We also have where we do the ongoing phishing tests on users, and I think we do monthly with our clients, at least monthly. I mean, it goes to me at least monthly, I know.
Right.
On top of that, you know, we also send out, the policy has to be reviewed annually. All the major policies like ethics or disciplinary action, things of that nature, we send it out to the users to read it, sign off on it, so that they've read and they understand what's going on out there. So yeah, it's really a constant battle. There are a lot of industries that, you know, where you have some people who are users who understand controls, understand cybersecurity, but other industries, they really don't have any knowledge whatsoever, and you really have to keep pounding in their head. It's just the way it goes. It's just, you have to keep doing it, no matter how annoyed they might seem. It's better than being annoyed than your organization really getting in the news.
It's funny, my brother's company, he works for a pretty large corporation all over the world. And they would do these phishing attempts, you know, in department levels. And if too many people failed, they would actually start to hold back money from the budget.
I've seen that too.
Oh,
yeah.
That will make people, yes.
I've seen where individuals get written up for multiple amounts of clicking on the phishing.
Yes. And, and I think that's something that you have to understand. That's a tolerance level. It's a risk tolerance level from the very top. And, you know, we all have to kind of do this when we're managing people in a decentralized environment. You know, it's decentralized now just because it's remote. Brings to another question that was just posted, which is something that's near and dear. You know, how the IT audit department works since everyone is working from home. I mean, how do you audit in a remote environment when we're so used to having to go in person to look at the papers and stuff like that? Joe, you probably be better.
I guess that's directed towards me.
Yeah.
So I've been lucky enough where I've had, well, as an internal auditor, I've had access to the systems myself as read only. So, you know, I would work from home 2 days a week, even without this situation with COVID. So I would have access to the systems for read only. Totally had access via Zoom, via
Mhm.
whatever I needed to have a meeting for, Teams or Link,
Right.
all the different avenues to be in touch with them. So I would never really, as long as the information was there, it's really not hard to do the audits.
Right.
As long as you're telling everybody beforehand what you need. I think it's a communication issue more than anything else. Say, hey, this is the stuff I'm going to be looking for. If you have that information, you tell them that in your initial meeting with everybody, your engagement meeting, then you get your access, you do what you have to do, and you have your meetings. So it's really how you manage it as an IT auditor. And
Right.
Shari, you know me, I'm so outgoing. I have no qualms about asking people for anything or for access to things.
Right.
So, and now from an external standpoint, I sign NDAs, so I get what I need.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you just have to really manage it the right way.
Right. Another question that was just posted in the chat too was about risk assessments and doing the risk assessment. And Michael, I think this also might involve you too in the whole package of, developing the assurance. I know all three of you have to do some level of a risk assessment. They're looking to see if they can provide an example. Well, I mean, there's different levels of risk assessments of when we're talking about an IT. So, there's an overall IT risk assessment that we use. We kind of mirror stuff that comes from an industry standard as well as that comes from the state. And other things that we've seen and developed internally. Kevin, I guess when you came in, what kind of assessment are you doing? Like a risk assessment to work with your clients?
So I think a good start is NIST 800-171. So if you look that up, there's basically 110 control sets that go, and they go pretty deep into what you need to do. But if you start looking at that, it's going to give you a good idea of what a risk assessment's going to be looking at to evaluate your systems.
Right. And Michael, I mean, I'm curious too, from how do you see the risk assessments? Do you get involved? Who are you working with in companies to help develop the cybersecurity insurance?
Risk assessment is a big part of what we do. We will work with, depending on the size of the organization, whether it be a risk manager, whether it be a CFO, whether it be the owner of the company. And depending on the type of industry that we're talking about, we'll tailor, the assessment to the class of business per se. And, we utilize a number of different insurance companies, and, different companies focus on different types of risks. And what we'll do is utilize various applications that, will enable us to bring out and provide, a detailed outline of, what their risk process is. And within that, we're going to go through that. And if we find there's some things that, we feel should be beefed up before we even talk to an insurance company, we're going to make recommendations and, talk to their professionals that they're dealing with currently. And if we find out they're not, well, then there's step number one, to really, as I said before, portray the risk as the best, the best that it can be. The last thing we want to do is, bring something to an insurance company, that's not at its optimum. You want to provide, the best analysis and the best outline of, the proper procedures for a particular type of account.
And Joe, I mean, from an audit perspective, the risk assessments that we go out and do that are IT related specifically, I mean, there's a general overall just to understanding the health of an organization, and then there's deeper dive like a network. Maybe you can walk like what's involved in doing some of the risk assessments.
Sure. First off, I think each organization has to determine which regulatory requirements they want to meet. Once they do that, whether you want to be HIPAA, you're going to be PCI, are you Ed Law 2D for New York State, you really have to determine. And then what framework do you want to use? Do you want to use a NIST framework, or are you just doing a basic IT general controls risk assessment? I think really all determines that really will drive what kind of risk assessment you're doing. If someone is deciding to do a NIST assessment, we're going to start with your 110 controls, of course, but you have your basic CIS 20, and I like to say +1 because they have not included the vendor management controls in there yet. And I'm huge on vendor management controls, since a lot of places are now going third-party vendor. So a lot of the 20 controls will be less relevant, not non-relevant, but less relevant as you go to the cloud providers. So it really all depends. Yeah, I'm going to look at policies and procedures. I'm going to look at your hardware and software inventory. Do you know what you have? I think number one, I think I don't remember if it was Kevin or Michael touched on that earlier, but that really is super important. You don't know what you don't know. If you don't know what you have and where it's located, I or anybody else who's doing an IT audit or any kind of audit's not going to be able to help you. The first thing I'll always ask is what software do you have, what hardware do you have, and where's your data? That's your very first, and what policies and what regulations you follow. I mean, there's a few things that you have to know right off the top. And then from there, you drill deep into, okay, we'll do our walkthroughs. We'll see what kind of controls you have around each one and what you absolutely need. I like to use the CIS 20 as my basis and move my way out into the sub controls from there.
Right, and you recommend also like doing some kind of a vulnerability, like an independent assessment. I mean, I advocate for that too.
100% vulnerability, pen testing, at least annually, annually. Reviewing your firewall controls at least annually. Everything has to be done at least, then I'm going to say at least, not annually, at least annually.
At least, right.
I like it done more than annually, but again, it's up to the organization.
We have a few minutes left, but I'm curious too, how do you pick somebody to do that vulnerability assessment or the ethical hacking? I mean, vulnerability means you're sticking your vulnerabilities out there for someone else to find. You know, how do you do this in a very secure, confidential manner, and also where they're not trying to sell you something?
Right. If that's directed towards me,
yeah, I could say it would be.
I know for us it's easy because our firm does all that, and we do ethical hacking and penetration testing. But honestly, organizations have to be comfortable with who's coming in there. They have to like the person's credentials, their experience, and really understand that. We're not trying to just sell you on services. We're trying to help your organization find out where your risks are.
Right.
As an auditor, I have no stake in the game. It's never for me been about any bonuses or anything extra. It's about identifying your risk and helping you. Especially when I was internal audit, I was part of your organization. So that's how my mindset's always been. I'm part of you. So if you get hacked or if you get anything, I'm getting hacked.
Exactly. Right. And Michael, and we have like 2 minutes left also, just, from how the risk assessment fits in and just everything we're hearing today from cybersecurity insurance, what should people take away from, the conversation from today, and what should people be doing, and using insurance, cybersecurity insurance? How does it all fit in?
That's a tough one. Well, really, I mean, we've basically been talking about this. It's really a deep dive, analyzing what your exposures are, what your procedures are, how you're protecting yourself, how you're going to react in the event of a loss. What are your controls in terms of what would happen if? How would you be able to function? How would you be able to get up and running? Those are all, part and parcel of the process that you're going to create, and really with all of that determine how insurance fits in. Does it make sense for us to take a large deductible? Can the organization withstand a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of assuming those costs, or is it something that they've got to be up and running and it's got to be made up in terms of the insurance, has to pick up, in essence immediately because they really can't afford, the downtime, et cetera. It's analyzing all of the exposures and most important, understanding what you really have in terms of exposures and really finding a way to dovetail the insurance coverage. Because as I said, the marketplace has changed. Every single renewal, the carrier is going to be looking for more premium, cutting limits, reducing costs, what have you. So, you know, these are all things that the clients are gonna have to be expecting. You know, there's no
Right.
question it's.
Right, and we're going to take it home right now. Kevin, I know you just posted up a link in the chat for NIST. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Someone had just asked where they can find out more information, so that's the link to the controls for NIST.
Right. I know we all can talk about this for another 5 hours easily. There's a lot of topics that we can't cover today. I mean, just even on password design, it's not even passwords, two-factor authentication. There's many other, or multi-factor, there's many other topics to get into. I do want to thank our panelists today, Kevin Urso, Joe Horowitz, Michael Fleischer. Thank you so much for joining us today. The contact information is available in the chat. I'm sure you could reach out to Kelly in our firm who sent out the invitation. You could reach out to me, Shari Diamond, sdiamond@CeriniCPA.com. We welcome, any other additional questions, and we want to be a resource to everybody, and we appreciate everybody's time. Looking forward to a happier 2021, and I hope everybody is staying safe and stay well, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you
for having me,
Thanks.
Shari. Take care,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.